leave any day now to be smuggled across the border to Turkey. Going by boat from Turkey to Greece is the cheapest way to get to Europe. She's afraid her two sons, Madaris and Munder, could drown, as so many have, trying to reach Europe's shores. Tens of thousands have risked that dangerous passage this year, arriving on islands like Greece's Lesbos. It's a perilous journey, made even more so by winter coming. But many Yazidis are even more afraid of going back to Sinjar, where ISIS captured or killed so many of them when it took over their villages in the summer of 2014. ISIS considers Yazidis infidels and vowed to either convert or kill them all. Amira says she faints when she even thinks of ISIS.
It's dangerous, but what can I say? I have to take my family and my kids. That's the way to get out. We're not going to return to Sinjar. It's dangerous either to stay or to leave. We might not survive, but we have to try.
A backlash in Europe against the refugees was already building as their numbers swelled. Now, after the attacks in Paris, Europe's open doors are suddenly closing. Tighter border controls have made it much more difficult to get to Western Europe. But thousands are still trying. For just over $2,000 each, Amira's family will be smuggled to Europe for what they hope will be a new start. Her husband Mahsen will be the first of his 5 brothers to go, but not the last.
My brothers collected all the money they have and gave it to me so I can make the journey. All the brothers have given me their money, and once I get there I can help them.
Their village is still under ISIS control. They say almost everything there has been destroyed by the fighting. The Yazidis lived peacefully with their Muslim Arab neighbors in Iraq for years, but that's all over.
A lot of people have died and people have drowned at sea. It's still better than going back to living among the Arabs. It's either leave or face death here.
Many accuse their Arab neighbors of joining ISIS and killing their people, enslaving their women, and stealing their homes. Some want to stay and avenge what was done to them.
As long as we can breathe, as long as we have a drop of blood left in us, no matter how far away they run, we will chase them. We are not going to abandon our land or our mountain.
Instead of a temporary refuge while they wait to return home, for many, this former construction site has become a way station on the journey to Europe. Almost everyone here is from Sinjar. They've turned this...
So the moral mission of this channel is to confront fascism in all its forms. This not only includes the white ethno-state proposed by the alt-right, particularly the white nationalist faction of the alt-right. If there's any part of the alt-right that is not white nationalist, either in theory or practice, I'd be shocked. But supposedly there are factions of the alt-right that don't support white nationalism. They support nationalism, which is basically a sort of xenophobia, as opposed to strict racial chauvinism. So to me, that's a distinction without a difference. What I'm here to talk about tonight, is Islamofascism. I haven't hit Islamofascism yet for several reasons. Number one, I am in the United States of America. Our Constitution makes the imposition of Sharia law impossible. Impossible. The Supreme Court would have to cease to exist in order for Sharia law. I mean, they literally have to erase the Constitution. So the idea that the Islamofascists are a threat to the United States of America is a throwaway. It's a canard. I don't buy it. That being said, what I do want to talk about today is what the white nationalists and ISIL, or ISIS, have in common. Because they do pose a threat just not to who you might think they do, or who they say they do. So if you look at these two groups, supposedly they want to annihilate each other. And it's, ostensibly, ISIL and, whatever country Richard Spencer creates are going to be, go to war one day in some kind of rehash of the Crusades, with European Christians going to war with newly established Muslim caliphate. Here is the rubric through which I examine the actual intentions of these movements. The enemy of ISIS is not in the West. ISIS is about controlling and dominating and slaughtering other Muslims. ISIL is a Wahabbi Sunni group, and all they've done so far of note, if you're going to count their biggest casualties, would be the Sinjar massacre. The Sinjar massacre was a slaughter of Shia Muslims. So while ISIS may use the West as a boogeyman for their recruiting materials and propaganda online, in the end, who they really want is other Muslims who don't agree with them. In theory, the caliphate is the end goal, but so far, all I've seen them do is commit acts of terror and tear down the cultural history of Iraq, and the taking of Mosul. That's been pushed back quite a bit, and deprive Muslim girls of their freedom and liberty. So, my biggest concern with ISIS is that they're a threat to other Muslims. ISIS is a threat to the East. They're not coming for you. They're not coming here. The Boston bombers weren't ISIS. 9/11 wasn't committed by ISIS. The white nationalists are not going to the Middle East to fight their crusade. The white nationalists are a threat to Western civilization. They are the threat, not the Syrian refugees, not the Muslim migrants. Those people are already running away from ISIS. They're not working for ISIS. They're not ISIS infiltrators. Those are McCarthyite talking points. If you don't know Joseph McCarthy was a Republican senator in the United States during the Great Red Scare who had paranoid, reactionary Americans looking under their beds for secret communist, crypto-commie infiltrator spies. The war on terror rhetoric is just another wave of McCarthyism on both sides. It is a way for people to purge enemies from within their own group.
Empty field into essentially a village. But even though U.S. airstrikes and Kurdish forces have retaken their own towns and villages on Sinjar Mountain, almost no one here plans to go home again. A lot of the younger people are trying to raise enough money to leave. They say if they had the money, almost everyone would be gone by now. Hassan, as he wants us to call him, is one of the smugglers getting people to Europe. Over the past 2 years, he says he's delivered more than 1,000 Yazidis and Kurds to Turkey, where his connections get them to Greece or Eastern Europe. There's no lack of business, but it's gotten a little bit harder for smugglers.
The prices right now in the last 4 or 5 months are the cheapest at any other time. Previously, the price was $12,500 per person, and you had to walk part of the way. But now, until we hand you over to a Croatian organization, it is $4,000. Until they seal off the borders for everyone, people will just go.
He says he never smuggles anyone he doesn't know, and he doesn't smuggle Arabs. At one of the biggest bus companies in Dohuk, 2 buses a day take passengers straight to Istanbul. $70 and a passport will get you a seat. For many, it's a one-way trip. Rizgar is 18 and traveling with his brother. His brother will stay in Turkey and pay the smugglers the $8,000 they agreed on once Rizgar arrives in Austria. Another brother, now an Austrian citizen, is waiting for him there.
I want to build a future for myself. I can see myself learning their language. It's a very beautiful thing for people to learn different languages and to go to school. I want to get an education because it wasn't good here. ISIS came and we couldn't cope.
The bus pulls up for the start of their 22-hour trip to Istanbul. Rizgar has heard of the doors in Europe closing for refugees, but he says he believes people will welcome them because they know of the tragedy of what's happened to Yazidis. Nisan is taking her 2 children and 4 nieces and nephews to Istanbul to be smuggled to Germany. Her husband and other relatives are already there. Everybody else is going, we're going too, she says. They don't look back. There are no tearful goodbyes here from the relatives seeing them off. Most of them are confident they'll see them again in Europe. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Jane Araf in Dohuk.
It's a way to purge white people who miscegenate. It's a way to purge liberal white people who don't agree with them, and incidentally to purge other Americans, even though they hump the American flag. They only care about skin color. If you hear Spencer or Woes or any of those white nationalists talk about their feelings about where they are, either Europe or America, they talk about it as in a state of moral decay that requires a cleansing restoration. You know what all those talking point means. You know what all those talking points have meant historically for the people who must be cleansed. So ISIL is the same coin, just a different side. Very often the skeptics of YouTube will make a very either cynical or painfully naive comparison between, even Millennial Woes did this in this circle jerk millennial conversation that he had with Sargon of Akkad. He said, gun to your head, you're going to have to choose between a white ethno-state or living in a state run by SJW. Well, those aren't even similar to each other. The state run by SJWs is going to basically be like a social democracy, like fucking Canada. Canada's a state run by SJWs. They seem to be doing all right. There hasn't been any fucking mass murders there. I don't think Trudeau is Hitler. I don't even think Trudeau could be Stalin if we're going on the other side of the political spectrum. Like, they conflate Stalin with, Stalin. They conflate Justin Trudeau, the feminist-in-chief of Canada, with Castro. There's even a meme going around that Trudeau was Castro's son. No, SJWs aren't a threat to Western civilization and Western values. You're thinking of white nationalists. The biggest threat to Germany is not Muslim migrants, it's white nationalists. The biggest threat to England is not the Islamization of London, it's the rise of the UKIP and the fucking Brexit. But you don't want that enemy. For the same reason that every goddamn fool that's ever had the wool pull over their eyes by a fascist organization has not recognized the threat is that it has the same fucking face you do. You American Confederate flag waving morons. You look at these white nationalists and say, I'm not going in the oven. Look at his face. He looks like my son. You extremist, Wahabbi, Salafist, jihadi nutjobs. You think that you're striking a blow for Islam, slaughtering Shia Muslims? You goddamn fool. That ISIS flag is a Muslim-killing flag drenched in the blood of Islam. Drenched in the blood of innocent Muslim women and children. You're concerned about what the West is doing to Muslims? ISIL's going to double down on that. That caliphate is not going to be built on the bones of the American empire. It's going to be built on the graves of innocent Muslims. You goddamn fools. Because you see a brown face, you think that the Wahhabis are on your side. See, that's the problem. McCarthyism, witch hunting, purity tests. That's these ethno-states, these religious states. In a nutshell, what you're being faced with here is the idea that you can have a pure nation. I mean, Israel even deserves Israel and their Lahud, because I'm not going to say Israel, because there are actually a lot of progressive liberal people in Israel. But the right-wing government in Israel is a fucking fascist organization. They are an ethnic cleansing fascist organization. Not the Jews. I'm talking about the political party, the right-wing reactionary political party, Lahud, who wants Israel to remain a Jewish state. I'm going to call that shit out too. Any of these purity mongers, these fascists, they need to be confronted. Because the atrocities committed by ISIS, by Israel, and buckle in, because even if you don't want to count the atrocities committed by the Bush and Obama administrations in the Middle East, even if you don't want to count those as part of the crimes committed by the white ethno-state, okay. We can take the Republican Party off the table for the moment because we have the alt-right movement atomized unto itself. The most important warning you need about who's coming to get you is to be weary of what you see in the mirror. In the world of politics, the killer comes and he's wearing your face.